Hi, welcome to the Pioneer. This is Rose Ojo-Ajayi. She is professor here at Cooper, and I'm Kitty, and I'm here to interview her. Hi, Rose. Would you like to introduce yourself? Say anything to start?
Sure. My name is Rose Ojo-Ajayi. I am currently the postdoctoral. I occupy the postdoctoral position in art history. My research is in arts of the African diaspora. I specifically look at photographic art, but I'm open to. Well, I've also written about arts of different mediums as well. I taught the introductory art history course the past fall.
The first question I have for you is that, so it's known that you've had an extensive time researching and studying arts in relations to African and Black studies. Can you tell us what your experience was like getting your BFA or MA or PhD? Were they different? Were they similar? What was the experience like?
Well, it's so interesting because I forgot to mention a very important part of who I am is the fact that I actually am an alum of Cooper Union. And I graduated many years ago. I'll just say in 2000. So, I was an art student. It was a very tremendous experience. And I, with the encouragement with my good friends, after we had our very intense critiques, we would sit down in our studios and talk about some of the conversations that were had, some of the comments that were made by our professors and also some of the other students. And also at times, some of the professors that I did not necessarily have, that my friends would have or my classmates would recommend certain books and texts for us to look at that would help strengthen our argument in the work that we're doing. And it was with these many conversations and the encouragement of my friends that I realized that, wait a minute, I like talking about these works of art. I like talking about the history of imagery as it pertains to the Black figure in art, which is so loaded.
Yeah.
When you put the image of a Black individual or an individual of color in a work of art, it's hard to get away from the identity of that subject, and that becomes the subject of that work of art. I realized that perhaps maybe I should go into art history and do more additional research about the history of image making by individuals of African descent, as well as the history of the Black image. And then also after graduating, I met a friend who told me that perhaps I should be interested in attending a school outside of the country. And let me be honest with you, around the time that I graduated from Cooper, it was a politically tumultuous time too. And just being unhappy with just staying where I was, and just luckily meeting another individual who was actually about to go to the school. He encouraged me to attend the school in the UK, the School of Oriental and African Studies, which is part of the University of London. When I first heard that name, I was like, what? They still use that term Oriental? But it was like, what kind of school is this? So, it took me visiting him at the school and also learning the history of people of non-European descent in the UK for me to unpack and understand. And that was a very interesting experience as, a person who is first generation Nigerian American, Black American, right? And being perceived as, here in the United States, I was perceived as Nigerian American.
Yeah.
There in the UK, I was perceived as American. Right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting, in London, they had some idea of the history of Black people in this country. So definitely I would get comments like, oh, aren't you glad you're in the UK and not in America? You know, with all that's going on, aren't you glad you're here and not there? So, you know, I decided after completing my master's in Arts of the African Diaspora, I decided to pursue further study in obtaining my doctorate.
Yeah.
And so, no regrets, right? In terms of, you know, having time allotted to do research.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very, very different experiences. And one, you know, major experience is location and also unpacking the ideas that I had, the preset ideas I had about each location, even in, you know, New York. As a student at Cooper, you know, I had to, you know, I learned a lot about New York City as an adult, you know, and lower New York City, the history of lower New York City and how that was changing at that time, you know, as neighborhoods, especially in the Lower East Side, were getting gentrified and everything. So, yeah.
Location must have been a huge part in everything. And
yeah, so it became my thesis topic, migration, you know, because it plays a huge role in the shaping of contemporary Black identities, you know, and it takes, I would also argue that it takes a huge role, or it places a huge role in contemporary American identities, plural.
Speaking about what you've researched, your experience in school, like we know that the Black Power and Black arts movement in the United States, as well as Britain, and the independence period of West African nations was a very big part of your research. And so, can you tell us more about like certain details or what you've learned that really stood out to you?
Well, it's interesting you're also asking this question now with all that's going on now. I would like to tell like my students and, you know, the other artists and creatives that I meet that it's amazing. I look forward to seeing what is created during this time period of major change, major movements, social and political movements. But I don't know if you could call it, I don't think it's necessarily narcissism. Well, maybe it is. Narcissism, you know, like, because for one, like, these movements have a huge role in shaping me, like physically, and then also how I began to understand the works of art that I would see that were created, the works of art and also the music, because I'm also very much influenced by music too, that was created during those time periods. Like, for example, the independence period in different parts of Africa, particularly like West Africa. It was shortly after the Nigeria was gained independence that my parents arrived in the United States. And there's like a lot of perceptions of, sometimes misperceptions, but perceptions of hope. Yeah. Nigerian hope also for being part of this diaspora, being part of contributing and, you know, coming to the United States and going back home, you know, to contribute to the development of the country. So, you know, I guess I was always curious about how things started, how things developed, you know, and it is the Black arts movement that actually bore some influence on the Black artist movement in the UK, which I learned about that when I did research there. Started by students such as yourself, right? Students who had graduated, some who were still in college, but most who had graduated from college and were very, you know, wanted to change the fact that there was a lack of representation of themselves in the museum, in galleries. Galleries weren't showing works of art by artists of African and South Asian descent in the UK. So they wanted to make changes, and they also made works of art reflecting their experiences growing up in the UK.
So you would say that like the diasporic, like the African diasporic identities just were very affected, especially in this movement.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and I also learned that, you know, it's a continuing process in terms of the assertion of these different identities that make a collective Black identity or Black diasporic identity.
So
You know?
my next question for you is, so like you mentioned about like the diaspora and so how do you think that specifically affects Black identities today? Not moving on from like what had happened, but like especially in this moment, like how do you think it really has like deeply affected like a lot of our newer generations?
Well, you know what? One thing I've noticed is that thankfully with, of course, the internet, right? Our world is becoming smaller. And we're being forced to confront some of this misperceptions about each other as a result of that. I will never forget, not a couple of years ago, there was this program on TV. And it was basically about this young African-American woman. And her going about her life and her dating experiences. And there was a comment made about, I think one of the individuals she dated was Black British.
Okay.
And there was a comment made about his Black British identity. And I remember it drew a lot of comments on the internet, you know, a lot of negative comments on the internet because it was an assumption made about Black British individuals that some people, particularly Black people who were living in the UK, thought was offensive. And because one thing, there's not much known about the history, well, at least here, you know, by many people, not much known about the history of Black sentiment in the UK, for one. And I'm choosing the UK for specifically that question because of this. So for me, after learning and unpacking some of my own preconceived ideas, right? It's not surprising that they are also protesting right now. You know, are very much engaged in civil protest because there's a long history of civil protest in reaction to the relationship between the people of African descent in the UK, particularly in many cities such as London, responding to police brutality. There's a long history. So, I mean, there's for some reason, just to, give a very, brief description of what happened, there was this idea that the individuals in the UK, based upon what was written, not written, what was said in this particular show, that Blacks in Britain did not really consider themselves Black, which is not true. That's a falsehood, for one, a huge falsehood. But or consider themselves better. So, with John Boyega, really, I don't know if you're familiar with John Boyega. He's an actor in Star Wars, one of the Star Wars movies, and he was recently, brought to attention because he made a very emotional comment about, the importance of civil protest, in the UK, and the importance of actually unifying with what's going on in the US.
Yeah.
With African American, but it's just in the US too. Yeah. So, I hope I answered your question because I went off on a tangent, but yeah.
There's a link between everyone now.
There's a link. Besides the historical link, there's a link in shared experiences, the continued shared experiences, both good and bad. I could talk about how also African American culture, in terms of music, and also influencing Black British
Yeah.
culture as well. So
I'm sorry. So like I have the next question I have for you actually is more so highlighting your you as an educator because you've done all these research, you've been to schools, so many different schools, you've gotten your doctorate, and me being even like a student of yours, like you, I know that you are mainly teaching African identities and African identities and Black identities relating to art. And so I know that you're teaching at Cooper, but also you've taught at other schools like Pratt Institute and Borough of Manhattan Community College. So I would just want to ask, like, what classes are you planning on teaching the upcoming semester, or something that like kind of let the students know like what's going to be happening.
well, this fall, two major things are happening. One, I'm teaching a contemporary arts of the African diaspora class. Now, in the fall of 2019, I taught a contemporary photography based in the U.S. and the U.K. But in the fall of this year, I'm teaching contemporary African diasporic art. So I'm not just looking at photography. I'm looking at other, sculpture, I'm looking at painting. So I'm also looking at net art as well too. So, but I'm looking at the creation of, or the works of art by artists of African descent, also in relationship to protest movements too, or civil and social movements that have been occurring as well.
That's amazing.
So yeah, it's very timely, So I look forward to that. Now, the second thing that I'm doing is that I'm actually currently working on a presentation that I'm going to do. It's part of what I'm required to do as a postdoc in my postdoctoral position, is also to do a presentation on my current research. So I'm doing a presentation on the works of photographic works of contemporary artists based in the U.S. and Africa and the Caribbean, who are looking at this idea. It was very much inspired by this idea of sanctuary and interiority, and how that is represented in their photographic works through formal means, how they situate their portraits of their loved ones, and also how they show their relationship to their, the fluctuations in their identities as a result of not forced, but voluntary movements. So yeah, that's what
That sounds like amazing. I can't wait to see your presentation, and also your class sounds extremely amazing and cool and fun. That I really like. Yeah. All right. Many people have many students and other people have known you as being like a very good, like great professor. You are very good at speaking. You're good at teaching and giving us different perspectives. But you've also worked commercially. You've worked as like a curator, and so can you tell us about sort of your experience in that and how that's different from being an educator?
You know what's so interesting? And I have to thank you so much for your beautiful compliments, because it humbles me, and also I believe also I'm a teacher at heart, very closely associated with being an artist and a scholar. I'm a teacher at heart, and so I do think that you never stop learning until you're gone, right? So I'm constantly trying to figure out more effective ways and experimenting with effective ways with trying to convey these ideas behind the creation of works of art that are the focus of study in the classes that I teach. And also the fact that I also always want my students to understand that history is also a construct as well. And it's in a constant state of reconstruction, right? That even some of them, if not all of them, are responsible for how history would present itself the generation to come or generations to come, and they have a hand in that. So I say all that to say that in terms of curating, I still have, I know myself personally, I haven't curated in some time, in the future, right? But I do also think of curating similarly, in a similar way, you know, in terms of conveying an idea or ideas that the artists are working with in their works.
So to sort of wrap things up, this question also does relate to your idea and like the style of like how you curate and teach and like how you want people to add their own ideas and build off of things. So knowing like your past and like research and like doing all these amazing things, in my opinion, how do you think all of the things that you've learned and done affects how you see the current civil rights movement that's happening right now, or in other words, the Black Lives Matter movement?
That's a huge question. But I'm glad, thank you for asking it. It's interesting because at times I feel like hopeful, you know?
Yeah.
Because one thing about this movement is actually really spearheaded by the younger generation. I'm saying younger than myself, you know? And what's so profound about this movement is the fact that there's not one singular leader. They're leaders. And for a long time, there have been questions. Even now, you may hear or read someone say, well, we need one leader. Who's the leader of this generation?
Yeah.
And I was hearing on the radio the other day that the news radio broadcaster basically was quoting Ossie Davis that, you know, and I'm going to paraphrase, where he basically said that, okay, you know, unfortunately, when a leader passes away, it's important that, you know, the work continues, that you pick up from the book or, you know, whatever his agenda is, and then continue with the struggle. And that's the beauty of the fact that there are several leaders. There's several people who are different people organizing the movements, which is great. And it's interesting. I look forward to seeing the result of it. Ultimately, I, along with many other people, want to see sustained change. No, not changes, not superficial changes that could be erased several years later. I mean, there's a reason why we're here now. Even with all the movements that occurred many years back, there are definitely going to be people who try to push and make changes. So it's very important that there be sustained, very, you know, marked, you know, changes made, and justice, true justice made, you know. So yeah, that's, you know, and I guess there's, on one hand, there's you know, history or knowledge could be seen as both a liberator as well as a burden. Right? You know, because on one hand you could be like, yeah, you know, this looks, you know, I understand when this happened or A, B, and C happened, you know, this is the result of it, but then you could be like, oh shoot, but then this happened to fight to erase what happened, you know, as a, you know, a concerted effort, you know, to erase the changes that were made. But there's some new things that's happening that haven't been seen before, you know. So that's what makes me hopeful.
I'm glad to hear that. You're like, because, you know, I feel like you're what you say is right. You know, like the newer generation is sort of spearheading this and taking a lot of action in this, because we've had resources and educators like you to help us in a lot of these situations. So I just want to thank you so much for letting me interview you. And
thank you. I feel honored.
I feel honored. No, please. But yeah, thank you for Thank you all for watching tuning into this interview with me and Rose Ojo-Ajayi.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay. How do I stop recording?